I'm a great advocate for the teacher-student relationship. I was never one of these people that figured that I could do it myself, that I could reinvent every wheel that's ever been invented myself better. I always figured if I wanted to work on a wheel, I would go and learn from a master wheel maker first, and then I would build upon what I had learnt from there. And the ego, the separate self, in its seesawing superiority, inferiority, likes to try to work everything out itself. And that's a great way to waste a lot of time and spend an enormous amount of time being mediocre. I'm a great believer in learning from someone who's already demonstrating high levels of proficiency in that which I want to integrate within my skill set, and just taking instruction, not arguing with them, taking instruction. And once you have sort of completed that apprenticeship training, then you start to be able to put your own flair, your own flavour onto that. Master craftsmen have a saying, which is, the real learning begins once you know it all. And there's an enormous amount in that. So this type of training is very much about an apprenticeship training, where you learn certain skills, you integrate certain knowing, a certain mindset, certain values, certain orientation of consciousness, certain alignments, certain attunements. And only when you become really proficient as a practitioner, as an alchemical practitioner, does the real learning really start, because that's when you start learning how you apply it yourself. Make it yours, make it uniquely yours. So a certain amount of humility is required when one enters into that sort of apprenticeship learning. Apprenticeship training is a wonderful thing. I had the opportunity to do an apprenticeship in tool making and engineering with some really master craftsmen, and I was astonished at the attitude of many of the other apprentices. It was though they resented the people that were really, really good at what they did, who were sharing their expertise, their tricks of the trade. And I used to get a hard time when I was doing my apprenticeship as well, because you weren't allowed to work through lunch or morning tea, but you know, right until the whistle went for morning tea, I'd be there working away, and I'd be ready to start again as soon as the whistle went to start again. I was there right till the whistle went 3 minutes before lunchtime, which was the time you had to go and have a wash and take your overalls off if you wanted to, and so on. And then when the whistle went after lunch, I was there ready to go again. And I remember the first year that I was doing my apprenticeship, I left school when I was 16, and I was doing my apprenticeship in the apprentice school, which was a very large section with about 130 other apprentices of all different kinds. And the first year we didn't have to actually work. When we first arrived, we spent a month going and working. This was a 30-something acre site, huge buildings, and we did absolutely everything. We were completely self-sufficient. So for a month we sort of went around and we worked in different production sections and experienced different things. I just had so much fun. Huge forging machines and blacksmithing and tool making and fitting and machining and hydraulics and pneumatics and every kind of testing, metallurgical and measuring that you could possibly do, lasers and all sorts of stuff, scanning electron microscopes, and it was a wonderful place. I loved it. And I was just so grateful for the opportunity. So after this first month, the other 11 months of that year, we went into the apprentice school, and all we had to do was make our own tools. It's like I'm being paid to make my own tools that I get to keep for me, to be able to use. It's like, thank you. That's really cool. And there was 3 or 4 of us who had that attitude. And during that year, we made spanners and screwdrivers and chisels and swords and knives and every kind of tool you could possibly imagine, spirit levels, and it was so much fun. It's so much fun learning to use all these machines properly. And then it was the end of August or early September. I had made every tool. I had used every drawing in the store, and I'd made every tool that was available, and only one person had ever done that before. And I was fairly proficient in being able to use these tools. On the weekends, there were some really master craftsmen in the town that I lived in who were retired, who had workshops in their backyard and so on. So I would ask someone that knew them to introduce, some of them were rebuilding motors and rebuilding old motorcycles and all sorts of things. Real hands-on engineering, old school. So I asked people that knew them to introduce me, and I went up, this little kid, I was 4'11" when I left school. And I'd go up to these old guys and say, look, do you mind if I come along on the weekend and hang out with you while you're doing what you do, because I'd like to learn. And they were like, oh, that's really cool, young bloke wants to do that. So I also had the opportunity to befriend some of these people that were really in their twilight years, who were looking to pass on everything that they'd accumulated and acquired wisdom and skill-wise over very, very long careers in engineering. And I had all of those people that I was befriending passing on what they knew too. That gave me an enormous head start on a lot of other people. And a lot of people that found out that I was doing this was like, oh, you're a suckhole and you're this and you're that and the other thing. To me it was just I wanted to be the best that I could possibly be within my field, so this was just an obvious thing to do. And so end of August, early September, I'd finished every job. So the apprentice masters then went, like, what are we going to do with you now? So we started to dream up all sorts of other tools, and there were old machines from when the factory had first opened in the beginning, the early 20th century, and that hadn't gone for years, that were in the museum. So they said, well, why don't you go and have a look at those machines and we'll see if we can pull them apart and see if we can make the parts that are broken in them and see if we can get them going again for the museum, to keep in the museum. This was so much fun. And we started to, and then we were sort of realising that I needed to make some of the tools that I needed to make some of the parts to fix some of these really old machines. There were no drawings or anything. And I'd make a part, and that was like, it didn't work. And I'd sort of get a bit down on myself. And they were, no, what have you learnt from this? What have you learnt from this? And so it was a wonderful environment for learning. And, we fixed a bunch of these machines, and I kept learning. And at the end of that year, normally it was only in the 4th year of your apprenticeship that you're able to actually go into the tool room where you're really doing the really precision stuff, grinding threads to hold aeroplane wings on and stuff. There's 4 16mm 5/8 bolts that hold on the wing of one of those big planes. And, the bolts are like $5,000 each. And so doing things like making these sort of things and working to incredibly fine tolerances. And you normally only went into the tool room in your 4th year, and as soon as I left the apprentice school, I went straight into the tool room. Once again, that made me extremely popular. But, you know, they said, well, you're already ahead of where most 4th year apprentices are. So, and not only did they put me in the tool room, they put me in the tool room basement, which was always where all the real precision stuff was done. It was climate controlled to 20 degrees Celsius and doing the super precision stuff. And, yeah, everyone, you know, hated me for that. But I had a great time, and you know, I went on to become Apprentice of the Year for Australia and win lots of awards and went in the Work Skill Olympics and so on. I had a really good attitude, and it wasn't even that it came particularly easy to me. I'm not a great student. That's the reality of it. I'm not a great student, but I apply myself really diligently, and I take instruction really well. If someone that's really good at something wants to spend their valuable time instructing me, I'm just so grateful. And I just absorb a lot of that, and then I practice and 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 practice. And I end up being really good at anything that I apply myself to. Some of you learn differently to that, not as gracefully, with not as much gratitude. And you do well to look at changing your learning style. You would do really well to look at the way that you approach receiving instruction, if you really want to maximise the proficiency that you're going to attain as you move through the training. And that is entirely up to you. Part of the mentoring process, you know, we talk about what it is to be coachable, what it is to be a good student, and we also have the good standing, what it is to be in the various grades of good standing as a student. You know, kicking and screaming and acting like your mentor that is teaching you and instructing you is somehow out to get you, or, you know, not actually on your side, is not being a great student. It's not being really coachable, not being in gratitude all the time, and so forth. So it's good to familiarise yourself with what actually constitutes being coachable. And it's not about blindly assimilating everything by any means, but there is a certain orientation which allows you to maximise the experience of the relationship. And Seg's done a great video which is on YouTube about the winning attitude for success on the spiritual path also, and really good for you to go over that and really familiarise yourself with that and look at your attitude to the growth process, because some of the heaviness that many of you are experiencing today is, there's only one reason, and that is you're identifying with your ego. That's what's causing that. So it's not spirit that's doing that. So spirit's trying to occupy space within you that you've reserved for your ego, for your selfish, separate self, which is only interested in survival and leaving your mark. You know, like the dog pissing on the post. That's all, you know, the ego, when it's given free rein, is interested in. And making its mark also includes passing on the genetic material. But it's a lot more than just that. You know, because if you use your will to dominate people, you leave your mark on those people. You leave your imprint on those people. And if those people breed and those people influence other people, then your imprint is being passed on and passed on and passed on. So it's not just a genetic thing. It's not just about sex. That leaving your mark everywhere you go. But when that is just all about the ego, and that's certainly not a spiritual pursuit. So you have to be aware of that. It's about mutual joy and respect. It's not about showing off. It's not about leaving your mark on everyone and everything everywhere you go, purely for the sake of spreading your influence and being remembered as a separate self. So what's happening with many of you is you're not letting go of the heaviness as fast as it's happening, so it's starting to get on top of you. Got to transmute the resistance. Not think about, oh, what's that resistance? I'll think about it for a while and I'll feel as I feel for 76 minutes and then I'll think about transmuting it. Feel as you feel doesn't mean you have to sit in it for 3 days. You only have to experience it for a moment. Without judgment, you can release it. You don't have to do the feeling justice by feeling it for a really long time. You don't have to do that. Feel as you feel, without judgment, release. And you've got to get into just releasing. As soon as you stop it, it starts to dam up. And as soon as that happens, you'll start to go unconscious. And you start to lose the ground that you've just made. So stop that. As you work with the violet flame highlights within you, by giving you this sense of heaviness, where and what within you has the attitude and orientation towards something which is less than mutual joy and respect in all of life that you experience. So that heaviness needs to be released as it comes up. I have a very healthy ego. But it's not about fear, it's not about separation, it's not about feeling superior to or inferior to anyone else. I have a healthy ego which is in the service of the spirit that I am. It's not about destroying the ego, it's about spiritualizing the ego so that it's all about love. But you need to be really mindful of how you are able to truly love yourself whilst being selfless, because that's what unconditional love is. Unconditional love is loving the self, yet being selfless.